Erev Tov, and good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. My name is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live Zoom studio audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating our first quarter century, first 25 years from 1995 until 2020. Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2020 in the Gregorian calendar, and the seventh day of Elul in the Israelite 5780 in the Israelite Hebrew calendar. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, Givat Hanania Abu Tur, overlooking Mount Moriah, where we believe that the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem will soon be under reconstruction as per the prophet Ezekiel's vision expressed in chapters 40 through 48 and stand forever. Our speaker for this evening's program is Professor Ita Shedletsky, who will speak about Franz Kafka's parable, Before the Law, a key text to understanding his world and writings. Now I would like to welcome our program chair, Dr. Les Glassman, who will introduce Professor Shedletsky.
Thank you, Lowell, and thank you, Larry, for organizing this evening. Prof, it's a great honor and a privilege to have you here this evening. So I just want to give a little introduction. We could spend maybe the whole evening just giving your CV, but I'll condense it. So Professor Ita Shedletsky was born in 1943 in Zurich, in Switzerland, and from 1962 to 2016 resided in Jerusalem. Since then, you're now living in Givatayim. He studied history, Jewish studies, and English literature at the Hebrew University, and until 2003, he was professor of German and German Jewish literature, the German department, and the Franz Research Center of the Hebrew University. The publications are many. We're just going to list a few. But on German, you had a publication on German Jewish literature of the 19th and 20th centuries. The editor of Gershom Shalom's Letters, a selection, on behalf of the Leo Baeck Institute. There were 4 volumes. And co-editor on behalf of the Rosenzweig Center in cooperation with the German and Swiss universities and archives, the critical edition of Elsie Lasker's Schiller Works and Letters. It's a great honor and a privilege to have you this evening, and we so look forward to your presentation. And we really want to thank you for your time. And without further ado, I'd like to call on our illustrious Professor Ita Shedletsky.
Ita is just a bit. Ita, your microphone is muted. We don't hear you.
Now, can you unmute?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ita. We look for. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation, and for it was quite a challenge because it's as I already said, I used to be talk to students whom I knew more or less, or at conferences, or but I gave, and lectures are not really, or big lectures, or as they were given in big halls. Is not. I like to talk with people and also to understand what they think and how they see it. And I chose a text, a short text, which for me, for my understanding, is a key text to the understanding of Kafka. And you have on it says in this text there, I very quickly found English translation together with the German original on internet, which made it possible to do it this way, because I talk usually in German or in Hebrew, and sometimes in English, but not very often. So I just wanted to give you already, this text was more or less the second text probably that appeared during Kafka's lifetime. The first text he published was The Verdict in 1911. And then he published this short text in a Jewish weekly called Selbstwehr, Self-Defense, in Prague in 1915, already in the middle of World War I. And he was writing at that time already, he was writing his novel, The Process, or the Trial, which wasn't published in his lifetime. And if you, I don't know who of you have read a little bit the data on Kafka on Wikipedia, because I wouldn't like to talk much about his biography, otherwise it would take up the whole session. So just I wanted to say that this is actually the only part of this novel, one of his most famous, and probably also as far as a Jewish context goes, that has been found out according to people who read it and could see some kind of Jewish subtext there. He was writing it, he was finishing it more or less in 1919. And in the same year, he published it in a collection of stories with the title A Country Doctor. And it belongs into this context. And I would maybe say something, otherwise it's too much in the air before I read the text and then try to share with you what you read here if you haven't read. I have no idea who read it before, how much of Kafka you have read. So I would like to say that for me, the first time I heard something, I heard about Kafka, we didn't read him in school. Today it's a canonic reading in German-speaking schools, and I think in the whole world, in the Western world, so-called, for sure. And we didn't read, but when I worked on my doctorate, which the topic was literature and literary discussion in German or German language periodicals and in the 19th and 20th century, from 1837, which was the first public big long-holding paper, Allgemeine Zeitung des Judentums, and until 1918. And in 1918 already, the famous periodical edited by Martin Buber, Der Jude, the Jew, was published. And in 1907, and I was, as the title says, I was trying to understand Jewish modernity and Jewish mentality and the differences between the religious confessions or however, or beliefs, and also the later discussions between when Zionism started at the end in the 90s, already in the 80s, Jewish national movement, the new conflict, the modern conflicts, all these matters. And in this context, Max Brod, who was the close friend of Kafka, as you know, and thanks to him, because he didn't fulfill the testament of Kafka to burn all the non-published works, his stories that weren't published, especially the three novels, The Trial, The Castle, and America, or The Missed Person, the person who disappeared. It's the same title, and he published it. And thanks to that, Kafka became one of the most researched, inspiring authors until this day. And I mean, the research is legend. It's also in all kinds of directions. What Broad there wrote an article called Our Authors. He called them Literaten, literature people, our authors, which means the Jewish German writing authors, and their community, in the sense not of Kehillah, but in the sense of what is called in German Gemeinschaft, group of people, isolated or in Gemeinschaft. And it was a critique of the expressionist authors like Franz and Albert Ehrenstein. You probably don't know the names. And Brod himself, who at a certain point became conscious of his Judaism and became a Zionist and all this. And there he says they are all isolated, they are a group, they are organized as authors, or they have connections according to their literary work, but not Jewish, in a Jewish context. And there is one author, which at that time he was almost the only person who really knew about Kafka. He said there is one author who is the most isolated person, the way he lives, but he is so much concerned with Judaism, and his texts are Jewish without, in a very deep way, without mentioning the word Jew in it. And this is true. You have no literary text of Kafka where the word Jew is mentioned. You can get to know his opinions if you read his diaries, if you read his letters, and he wrote a lot of letters, and most of his letters have been published in the meantime, his letters and also correspondences. So this really intrigued me to look at Kafka in my research of understanding how modern Jewry, from neo-Orthodox to liberal to atheistic to a Zionist, anti-Zionist, only fighting against anti-Semitism and all these contexts, and trying to what is called Jewish Renaissance, Jewish cultural movement, all kinds of things. Excuse me, I have to drink water. So it really intrigued me to look at Kafka from this, and that was the trigger to deal with Kafka with an accent on this aspect of the Jewish subtext, if you want. I did the same with Heine, with Heinrich Heine too. So I have I wrote once, I dealt with an article in the tension between Heine and Kafka, the discussions about emancipation, assimilation, and Zionism, which I gave at the conference, my first lecture in Germany. So I'm in this, just to give you a notion of what my interest is. And I remember the lecture of Rabbi Breitowitz, who was talking about the Pintele Yid. I'm trying to find the Pintele Yid, or more as than a Pintele, in those Jews. And even with Heine, if I may say, Afal pi shechata Yisrael, he baptized, he didn't want to, his family wanted, but after he was baptized to Protestantism, he dealt more and more with Jewish matters, being irritated. So it was like dialectic, very interesting one. And there are Jewish texts and subtext in his. So that's my frame of thinking. So I just wanted to say also from which point of view or point of research I'm dealing, and that's why reception of literature in different periods is how it is understood at the time of the author, how it is understood. That's one of my main matters. So after having said this, now I read the text, and I would like to read it as a whole. And then we can talk about parts of it, and maybe just what you call to learn together, lernen, the text. And then maybe we can try to put in other, I can go to other works and to show how this is probably a key text, as well as to the Jewish matters, as to the existential position of Kafka, his personal, everything. Okay, so I read now. Before the law stands a doorkeeper. A countryman comes to the doorkeeper and asks for permission to be granted access to the law. But the doorkeeper answers that for now it is not possible. Having reflected upon it, the man asks if that would be possible later on. Maybe, says the doorkeeper, but not now. Since the doorway to the law, as always, is open, and the doorkeeper shifts a bit, the man stoops as to catch a glimpse through the open door. The doorkeeper notices it and laughs. There is a strange word, it must be laughs if you have the text before you, and then says, if it is so attractive, then try and go in spite of my denial. Watch out though, I am powerful, and I am only the last of all doorkeepers. Doorkeepers stand at the entry of each room. I think it should be hall, because in German it is Saal, which means a hall, a big hall. It's not just a room. And each is more powerful than the previous one. Already the sight of the third doorkeeper is unbearable to myself. The countryman had not anticipated such difficulties. The law, in his own view, shall be accessible to anyone. Yet now, observing more closely the doorkeeper bundled in his fur, his great beak of a nose, the long and thin beard kept in the fashion of the Tartars, the man decides that it's in his own interest to wait until permission is given. The doorkeeper offers him a stool and makes him wait by the door. For days and years remains he seated right there. Many a time he tries to be let in, wearing the doorkeeper down with his prayers. The doorkeeper often puts him under interrogations, asking him about his country and many other things, but these are questions asked from a distance, like without involvement, the way great people do, and ultimately he always ends up telling that the entry is denied. The man, very well equipped when he began his journey, draws from all of his possessions, regardless how precious they can be, in attempt to corrupt the doorkeeper, who accepts all bribes, warning, I only accept so that you shall not think you might have overlooked anything. During all these years, the man observes almost incessantly the doorkeeper. He forgets that there are many others, and this very first one appears to him as the only obstacle to the law. He laments over his misfortune. In the first years, he does so aloud and disregardfully. Then, as he grows old, by simply mumbling to himself. He grows dumb, and having studied the doorkeeper for long years, as he spots a flea on his fur collar, He entreats even the flea to intercede so that the doorkeeper may change his mind. In the end, the man's eyesight becomes weak, and he wonders whether indeed everything has grown darker around him, or it's simply that his eyes are betraying him. Yet now, in the darkness, he perceives an inextinguishable gleam through the chink of the last door, probably. He has little left to live. In his mind, before his death, all the notions gathered in such a long time draw to a single question that was never asked to the doorkeeper. So he waves at him, for the stiffness that overwhelms his body does not allow him to get up. The doorkeeper has to greatly stoop down to him, since the difference in their heights has gradually changed to a disadvantage to the man. What else do you want to know? Asked the doorkeeper. You really are insatiable. All men strive to come to the law, says the man. Then how comes that in many years, other than me, no one has never asked to enter? The doorkeeper realizes how the man is at his very end, and in order to reach his already diminished sense of hearing, he shouts, "No one else could be allowed through this door. To you alone its access was reserved, and now I go and close it shut." So, what do you make with the story? What's the feeling you have? What is the situation? What are the possibilities, other possibilities? What?
Lower, people are muted. Maybe you can unmute them.
Oh.
Well,
Maybe everybody should unmute themselves.
it's always hard to read Kafka. It's not a very optimistic view.
But do you think there is some kind of hope here? I ask you, but maybe
Not,
I should also say something. Yes, don't want to intercept.
not in the view of Kafka.
What?
Actually, I disagree, Ehud. I think that
Yes.
it's full of hope. What does this story mean to me? First, I'm not so sure that everything has to be analyzed. It's just a creative experience, something very different. There's value to that. But it shows that we are, in many of Kafka's stories, K is very helpless, right? He's always has obstacles. He doesn't understand what's going on. But in this story, it's clear that he was the obstacle. He could have gone in there. Why didn't he just get up and try to go in there? Why didn't he grab the bull by the horns and go? Okay? He was the master of his own destiny, and he tripped himself up. So I would say that there is hope. And we are creating our own hopelessness maybe sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We're not willing to take a chance.
Okay, maybe I have to go back, because sometimes the original language, or very often, it is more accurate than a translation. In German, it says "vor dem Gesetz," which means two things: either in space, be in front of the law, you are in front of the law, or you are before the law in time. And another connotation, and I will try to understand. So, "vor dem Gesetz" is in this sense of in front of the law, is a legal term as far as I know, also coming from Switzerland, in democratic constitutions, you call it. Chukka is constitution, And the Swiss constitution says all Swiss are equal before the law. Okay, and I think this is a legal term, but for dem Gesetz can also be in a world, in an ancient world where there was no law, or we don't know the law because there was no tradition in certain, if we now look global, not only at the Western Hemisphere or at the world, but in time, there is what is called in German, pre-world, Vorwelt, yes, primal world, a world before, for example, the world of all kinds of people, tribes or so, who didn't have a language and didn't write. They only had symbols, and I think the most advanced, or among the most advanced I'm now speaking about, not about Asia, but in everywhere there were these tribes, and we don't know. There was no language, so if there was no language, there was no thinking, there was no law, there were all kinds of notions, of beliefs, of mythologies, all kinds of things. That's, and a lot of, so now why am I saying that? Because this man, and I maybe another word, the countryman is not as exact as the German, ein Mann vom Lande, a man who came from the country, which means from the countryside. Of course, it's clear, but here too. But there is and here I already, what shall I say? I already hint at something, a Jewish aspect. Der Mann vom Lande could be something like Am Haaretz. He is someone who doesn't have doesn't, you know, there is the law, but doesn't really know what the law is. You know, it's the law, and of course the law is a general world. It might be the law, the written law, or it might be the law court, or it might be the authorities who give you all kinds of permissions. And we don't know, because Kafka, he takes the general world, the law. Of course, he was a lawyer, and he worked, if you have read a little bit, he worked in an insurance company, and he knew very much also about people who worked in industries and were hurt and had to get damage money to repair money for the damage and all these things. So we are in this world of Kafka, and he is someone who is some kind of Am Haaretz, Bamuvan Shel. So we have all those dimensions, and in this sense, this text is a key text because most of the figures in Kafka are either these people. It's not only helpless, but they are in a way, isolated by in a society of, if you want, citizens of the town. Of course, to speak about the man from the countryside is there were these differences. We are in the time of urbanization, industrialization. There are a lot of masses of people came into the cities, and this dichotomy between the city life and the country life, and of course you have country life is also landscape. But I don't want to go on here, but that's one point we have to take. But I would like to ask, what is the atmosphere here in this text? How do you feel? What do you see? What do you see? Or what do you smell something? What's what's the life in here? Or what do you see with your eyes? Do you see the countryman?
Sure.
No. What do you see?
As far as I'm concerned, I see only the obstacles, and I don't see much of a hope here.
But you see one figure who is like a caricature, you know, this storekeeper. There you see the grotesque side and the humorous side. It's a caricature, it's a Tatar, it's someone who, and there is a meeting between...
Why humorous? I mean, it's a daunting one. It's not a very, I don't see any humor here.
Oh, there is a lot of humor here, of course. Also, he is talking to him. Now I must make a confession because I want to be a little bit provocative. I have a colleague. I'm not in touch with him so much in Germany. We worked together on the Lasker Schüler, and he was in Jerusalem a lot, and I was in Bonn. We working together. And when he had his 60th birthday, I was giving him some kind, he made a text, they made him a present that all of his colleagues and friends would write something, and I did some kind of drash, and I did it on with the title, I have here vor dem Gesetz, nach dem Gesetz, a drash on Kafka and Goethe. I just want to, so about Kafka, and I mentioned already the Swiss constitution. And the Swiss constitution says all Swiss, it's of course masculine, Schweizer, it's only the men, are equal before the law. It excludes the foreigner, it excludes, of course, the Jews, most of them, if they're not born there, the women, for example. And I told my friend, colleague, provocatively, you know, I think if a woman would have been there, she would have gone in at the moment when he said, you can go in. You can go in, but be aware, it's frightening. I said, maybe I would have gone in there, you know, and at least at the moment when I would have seen the light there also, I would have just gone in, but when it was clear that he's going to close it, I would have gone in. Okay, that's one thing. A woman would have gone in, and equality and the law, and you know, it's the law. What is the law? The law is something very tricky. And maybe I will tell you what the usual explanation is for this description of the inhibitions of people. It's like a critique of bureaucracy and of the bureaucracy of the Austrian Habsburg Empire and all the countries also. But I think this is not enough for an explanation. Also the castle, I don't know who of you have read The Castle. There also a man comes and he is invited to measure the land, to overview Shammai, what you call in Hebrew Shammai, Aratzot, but he can't get to the castle. He has an order for the castle. So there is always this hindering of what, that's one. And then I think there is more to it. And I was asking of if there is something of hope, and I think the hope is in the middle of, or towards in the text, where it says when he looked, before he lost his sight, at the end he saw a light, an unextinguishable light coming out of there. And this light is the light of hope. You know, of course, it's before he died, he saw the light. He himself couldn't fulfill the hope, but there is some kind of, which says there is more to it than this frightened. There is light, there is hope.
I disagree with that. I think as long as people are as helpless as he is, and not willing to take a chance, and not willing to argue, passively obeying the law, the so-called law of the guard, then there is no hope. There's only hope
Yes.
is if you stand up for justice, you stand up for your rights.
Yeah, but then you have to
argue.
have a certain education and a certain
No, you have
stand.
to have a spirit. I don't buy that. I think many people are uneducated with spirit, and they can
Yes.
fight and they can be heroes.
Yes, yes.
Also, why did you say that women would go in and not men? What's the difference? Why women?
Because we have, we dare sometimes, we dare more, you know. We have chutzpah more in some
Really?
way. I would have gone in, probably.
But
She
I would
said
have gone
you
in
can't
also.
go in, so I wouldn't, of course, you know.
But I'm not a woman, and I would have gone in also. And probably Ehud would have gone in also. You know?
Okay, okay. So I see that you are, I give you another interpretation, which ties, and a very early one, 5 years after Kafka's death. There was a poet, but she also was an essayist and a kind of philosopher. Her name was Margarete Sussman. She was born, and she's, to my great sorrow, she's not translated into German, into English, and not into Hebrew. There are people at Bar Ilan now who are interested in her. She wrote an article in a German periodical called Der Morgen, the morning, in 1929, which means Kafka died in 24. And the title of this essay is The Problem of Job, Iov, in the writings of Franz Kafka. And she compares Kafka to, and she's talking about Job, of course, and the suffering and all this. And he is talking to God, and he is talking to, he is crying and he's saying, why God doesn't answer, and he suffers, and his friends and all this. And then suddenly God answers, and he answers him with a question. And he says to him, were you there when I created the world, and all that's written there? And then he suddenly understands his place, and he rejects, because he got an answer. God, he could hear him suddenly. Of course, you can explain it, what it means, of course, but suddenly there was a possibility that God could talk to him. He could hear God, because he never ended to be a believing Jew in his time. And in this story, as told, which is the most symbolic book, of course, we don't think that Job was a historic figure like Moshe or other people or the prophets or so. So it's so that's, and then she connects with Kafka, and there enters the question which interests me: what about Jewish belief in modern times? And she says about Kafka she said that also in the book of Job, the fate and the suffering the suffering and the history of the suffering of the Jewish people is pre-designed already. And she sees in Kafka, and especially in this, in all his writings, but especially she begins with this passage before the law. And she said the situation of these modern Jews, for them, they had a feeling of they were suffering, and they felt guilt, and they didn't know what the guilt is. This is the topic of the trial, of course, that he doesn't know. And she tries to explain it in the condition after emancipation, and there is also in theology of the early 20th century, there is a theology of a God who has disappeared, who is still, which means he hasn't disappeared himself, but he is not accessible anymore by a majority of people, Jews and others, but they feel that there is a guilt. And so God is still present in the world, but he is hidden. He is what is called in Latin the Deus absconditus, you know. And there is theology, Jewish theology, Protestant especially, and Catholics who deal with this. And she sees this, and she says also with Kafka and all his figures in Die Verwandlung, the people are feeling a guilt, and they don't know what the guilt is, because God, whom they don't see anymore, is still working. And this is the existential suffering of these people. And she explains in her article which she wrote, she puts that suddenly he saw a glow is like there was a moment of hope, and there is a possibility to see this light, but sometimes it's not a personal, but the hope is still there. And here she connects, like it's a minimal hope, it's not the same story at all, but there the two texts connect. And in the middle of it, she is talking about the style of Kafka, which I asked you, how does Kafka write? He writes in a very sober and the stories or the novels happen in a world which is a world of matter of fact, or of things, a matter of fact or a material world conveyed as, and it's described in a very sober and a very overclear language, a very simple language. There is no decorum. I ask you, do you see any landscape? Do you see any building? You don't see anything. You see only this figure. That's what it's very hard. Maybe as I said, I don't know how many of you have read Kafka, but this is a common, and the people, also the figures, there are in this helplessness, or it's the condition of a modern world where men are estranged. And of course, she was in her own way came to believe in her kind of Judaism. Margarete Sussman, she wrote about the biblical figures, and especially she wrote after the Shoah in 1946. She wrote a book where she took up this topic, not with Kafka, but she wrote a very important book trying to explain in some way. At this early point, she was living in Switzerland. She was born in Hamburg, and she had grown up in Switzerland, went back to Germany, and in the war she was in Switzerland. And she wrote this book with the title, The Book of Job and the Destiny of the Jewish People, which is some kind. So she takes this further. She takes the Bible. So I just wanted to give you this. This was for me. Also, after years, I haven't read her article. Again, I understood that this is very important. And she also was a very early intellectual who took Freud seriously, and she tries to connect the atmosphere in the texts of Kafka, having this one level of reality which is all material in a very, very matter-of-fact language, in a world of what you call Sachwelt in German, of things, and not much of really living there, or of decorum. And the language also is not a poetic language or a language of decorum in some way. But she said beneath that are all kinds of wild visions and dreams, like this. She brings together this material world and the world of the dream interpretation of of Freud, and she brings the things I have asked myself because I've never heard about Freud relating to Kafka, but Kafka has related to Freud in his diaries. You can see that he read Freud and in several contexts. So I wanted to put this as a explanation into, and there is another thing from going with the title. Vor dem Gesetz in German, there is the contradiction, there is vor and nach, there is before and after. And there is a saying in German, nach dem Gesetz. There is vor dem Gesetz and nach dem Gesetz. And what does nach dem Gesetz mean? It means not after there is no law anymore, but it means according, or in Hebrew it would be lefi hachok, yes, according or according to the law. And this is a line which alludes to Goethe, as I mentioned, and this poem or 5 poems of Goethe, which are called primal words, Orphic, Urworte. It's like old words in the Greek context, yes, which was the context of Bildung of education in Germany, and these poems have been read in high schools. I'm sure that Kafka, when he went to high school, he read this. It's what you call in Hebrew Nirsei zum Barzel. And I read you. There are 5 poems who deal with different states of mind or spiritual states. The first one is called Daimon. It's not only a demon, but it's something like spirit in a way. More. The second is in Greek Tyche, the accidental. The third one is Eros, love. The next one is necessity, Ananke, something which is necessary, and the last one, the 5th one, is hope. So in the first stanza is, or the first poem, there are 5 poems connected with these terms, titles. So I read you the English translation of the first one, which is important for us. As on the day you were granted to the world, the sun stood to greet the planets. You likewise began to thrive forth and forth, following the law that governed your accession. You must be so, you cannot flee yourself. Thus Sibyls long ago pronounced, thus prophets. And neither time nor any power can dismember or can cut into pieces characteristic form, living, self-developing. And the important lines are, according to the law, that according to the condition, you can say, or to the, when you were born, you must be so, you cannot flee yourself. These 2 lines are the motto in all cultures. It's like Da et atzmecha, or in our tradition, it is Da me'ayin bata ule'an ata holech. It's this individual knowing who am I and what is my task in life, and of course in any, so according to law. So this man from the country, he is not in a position at all to know things like that. So it's like, yeah. Of course, Kafka is not optimistic, but there is a sense of, there is grotesque in him. There is, okay, there are different texts, but most of the text is clear. It's really this being lost of modern man, I think.
You know,
Also because of Yeah.
As I hear you, that I have the following thoughts. That first of all, when you read a story, there are at least two people involved besides the characters, the author and the reader. Because the reader is the one who creates associations, and there are many
Yes.
associations. I tell you what
So
my
I asked you. Mm-hmm.
yes, so I tell you two things. First of all, I see a different picture than you described. I see the hero, or the very failed hero, is the poor man from the countryside. And then there is also the guard and the gate. Okay, that's a picture that I see, the sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And my association is actually to the Shoah, because I understand something better. You know, during the Shoah, there were some Jews who stood up, and it was seemed impossible to save the Jews, to stand up against the Nazis, to do something. That's what the Jewish leadership did. They followed the law. You know, for example, in the United States, Stephen Weiss, the head of the World Jewish Congress, the friend of Roosevelt, etc. In Switzerland, where you come from, Sally Meyer, who was a representative of the Joint, who behaved very badly. The people followed the law fair. They didn't go through the gate. Who did go through it? The people who grabbed the bull by the horn, like Hillel Cook in America, or Recher Sternbuch we spoke about, or Mantello, etc. And I think that's a lesson that I have, that you feel that something is impossible, maybe impossibility is in your mind. Just as in the countryman's imagination, it was impossible. In reality, the whole thing was built for him. He's the one who fell into the trap. Why do you listen to the man who says that to you? Why don't you argue with him? And I think it's a lesson to
Because
be.
you don't find yourself. He is a stranger. He doesn't have any standing there.
No, I tell you, I don't buy that. Because Hillel Cook, who was sent to America, who was in America, who was a very young man, he was one of the founders of the Irgun. He had no standing in America. He hardly spoke
But
English.
he was a political human being. This is a man who doesn't know what the law is.
He was, that's true. But in America,
there is something called, yeah.
He was a stranger in America. He was poor. In fact, somebody called Ben Hecht, who was a scriptwriter from Hollywood, one of the best screenwriters, came to New York to help him to create propaganda to save the Jews. And he said that he had to take Hillel Cook to lunch, to dinner. They were Palestinians without any money. But he had the spirit, he had the guts, just like you. You have the guts. You said you would have gone through. That's the thing that one can also learn something. You'd ask, what do you learn from this?
But it's a different tradition one has grown up in. It's not a question of being poor or not poor. It's a question of being lost because you don't have and you are afraid, and the systems are cruel. We know that. I mean, the thing with the bureaucracy is not, I think it's only one explanation. And maybe I'll give you another kind in order to broaden it up, because there have been thousands of, not thousands, but many, many interpretations. What is the subtext of this text of going into a building? And if you look, there is an entrance, and then there is one hall after the other, and each door is closed, and every time you have to open another door in order to get there.
We don't know that. We only know.
We
only know that.
It's a symbolic.
No, but the symbolic is wrong, because you believe the guard. Maybe the guard was lying. The guard was lying, maybe. How do you know there are many halls? You don't know that.
Because it's right. No, that's what he says. He said there is a doorkeeper. He doesn't give a picture of a place where there are long corridors or something like that with rooms, but there is one room after the other. You open one, you get to the next with a closed door. And then you get to, and you have to open all the doors. When do you have, and let me put you in a different frame. And I give you, for example, and we had a psychologist in the last 2 days ago, and I'm sorry that he isn't here, but there have been psychoanalytical interpretations of this text saying that if you have a problem and you are stuck with you are blocked, you are traumatized, you are all of these things, then you go on and you open a door, and before you open your door, you are even more afraid, and then you go through. But as deeper you get, as more difficult it gets to go to get to know your trouble, to get to know yourself, in the sense I was talking before. Who am I and how can I help myself? And these closing doors is, and then there has been, I just want to finish this aspect. The postmodern thinker, also a Jew from Algeria, Jacques Derrida, he said that's the way you dive into a text. You understand one level, and then you go deeper into it and you understand more and you get more. So it's like a symbolic, it's you see what I mean? That's what interpreted, what researchers, what people, there is not, that's the universality of Kafka, that he opens up so many, and he has, and if you read,
but one must still ask,
yeah.
Many times we read the story, we just enjoy it. But in this case, I guess one could ask, this is a shiur for life. What do we learn from this?
It's an irritating story. You can't enjoy it. It's an irritating story.
No. Usually we enjoy, Kafka stories are not enjoyable, but we enjoy the strangeness, the uniqueness, like Metamorphosis, the penal colony, etc.
Yes.
But in this case, I think there's a shiur here also. What do we learn from this for our life?
Yes.
And I think that we learn that, for example, somebody tells you there are doors and there are many holes. Said so. Er hat gesucht, like they say in Yiddish, right? So I said so. Why do I believe him? How do I know? I didn't try to go in. I never met him. I don't know his father. I don't know where he comes from, who his family is. I don't know how he was brought up. I don't know if he's a liar or he's a truth teller. Why do I believe him? Just because he's an authority. I'm a master of authorities. I'm a Borg.
Yeah, but not everybody is able. He has mental blocks. People have mental blocks.
Maybe there's a thing to learn that you must get rid of the mental blocks to be an individual.
You must get.
And the education system. No, the education system has to teach that to you. That you have to be an individual. You have to think for yourself.
And if it doesn't, and if you are there is an anecdote about Frederick the Great of Prussia, who was he was called he was helping the Aufklärung, the Enlightenment in Germany, and he made many wars. He said everybody can die after his façon. He didn't believe in anything, so it was easy to him to be tolerant. And then it is said his fame is that he developed or helped developing the school system of public schools. You know how he did it? This my Jewish history teacher in Zurich in the high school told me, in a non-Jewish high school. He explained to us, he said, you know how he had been in many wars, and he's led many wars. He was a man of war, and he had a lot of officers who were wounded or whom he had to give some kind of occupation. So he sent these Prussian officers to the villages, and they taught the pupil, and he said, you can imagine what kind of education they did get, you see? So fame and truth, and so,
Wonderful analysis. Kol hakavod to you, really. Kol hakavod. Noga, would you like to say something? I think you got your doctorate in literature, if I remember. But your microphone is muted.
Yeah.
No, I would maybe.
Noga, there is no picture.
No, Noga was had to leave when she started listening.
Oh, I see.
We're having our grandchildren.
Oh.
But I don't know. I see it as a very gloomy picture. I mean,
it is. Have you read Kafka? Have you read Kafka?
Sure.
And what did you read? No, I'm just interested. Where was it less gloomy?
No, it's always, I mean, it's interesting, it's compelling in a strange way, but it's always a hard read, and you don't feel well at the end. And in this story also, I mean, to me, it looks like there's a minimalistic picture of a person and an obstacle, and a promise that the obstacle repeats itself, and it's gonna be even harder. So if you overcome this one, you will encounter the bigger one. The only hope is, as you said, is that just prior to his death, if he's sort of or whatever. When the law is not necessarily the law, it may be sort of a God or whatever.
But maybe I mean, Kafka doesn't dissolve this is the story, you know, that in the process, in the trial, actually the Joseph K., who doesn't know for what he's guilty, doesn't even come to the trial. There is no trial. Suddenly one day, but he thinks the trial, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about the trial also to show the context, which might be also have Jewish connotations. The whole trial takes place in houses that are houses of apartments, apartment houses, and not very fashionable ones, but very simple ones. And the hall of the trial is on top of it. And it reminded, and I read a doctorate of a German student, he didn't make it, but he found out, and I hadn't thought of it, but although I have my own experience with it, he said that this is like a sort of synagogues which were just minyanim, no synagogues, in apartment houses where, and that's how I grew up, in the house where my Talmud Torah was, where the shul was before they built the big building. The rabbi lived in the first floor, another teacher lived. It was a house which belonged to the community. The bottom floor was the entrance was 2 minyanim, and it were the rooms of the Talmud Torah where we learned. So then I said, you said it, that's what I know. So Kafka gave this, it's like absurd, but if you are a Jew, it's like something which has to do maybe in any way with a trial, and the judge is God, you know, in some way. There is a connotation of it. And not only this, there is, where does Kafka put this text in the novel? Towards the end. Joseph K. is busy, and he tries, and he works in a bank and he goes and he works, and then they have guests, and he wants to show them Prague, the town, and Italians, and they meet, and he wants to show them the cathedral, the dome, and they meet near the dome, and they don't come. Then he goes into the dome, and in the dome, it's an empty dome, it's all empty. And then suddenly he hears the voice of a priest, and he asks the priest, and the priest says to him, "You are the situation of your trial is not good." So he said, well, and then it turns out that he is the priest in prison, a prison priest, and he tells me, and you are mistaken. You deceive yourself. And then he reads him, and he said, I want to explain you what the deceivement is. And then he tells him this story, this parable before the law. There, Kafka puts it in it. And then he says in the end, and he discusses with him, but this is not logical, and this is not okay, and this is not, and how, and then he says, the people who explain, the explainers, Hamefarshim, say a right concept of a thing or of a matter and misunderstanding of the same matter don't actually not exclude each other totally. So he leaves it open, and he leaves it in the dilemma. And shortly after, the next we go towards the situation that there is no trial, and the 2 men come and take him out, and they stab him like a dog, and that's how the novel ends. You see, so it's even worse. And now there, if I may add, Larry had asked me about Gershom Scholem. Gershom Scholem dealt a lot with Kafka in this aspect, and together with his friend Walter Benjamin. And there is a poem which he wrote into an, how do we say it? Not a volume, עותק של איך אומרים עותק?
Issue.
A copy of the process, the first edition of the process in 24, which he gave to a friend of his, and he wrote a poem into this copy, and there is a English translation. There are English translations of Scholem's poems. It's called "In the Fullness of Time." The Fullness of Time. Edited in Jerusalem, there is an Ibis edition who translate medieval Hebrew poetry. It's the name of the, it's a couple, Peter Cole and Adina Hoffman, who run this edition. And they translated, they made an edition with the German original and the English translation of Scholem's poems. And the poem runs like this: Are we utterly estranged from you, Lord? Is no beneath of your peace, of hint of your promised light, mean for us in this dark night? Can your word have so expired among Zion's empty wastes, or has it yet to permeate the spellbound realm and semblance? It's like asking God questions. What's happening? Why? What's happening? This injustice, and he reads it as a theological text in this way, that God is actually the judge. But I just want to give you. Can your word? The second stanza, which I read in the German. Origin says, can your word have gone away in der Lehre Zions? Lehre in German, written with 2 E's, is emptiness, but Lehre Zions, written with E and H, is Torah mit Zion, ki mit Zion tetze Torah. So he plays with the emptiness of this cathedral, because the description of this scene in the dome, where Ka comes in and he's alone in this huge empty cathedral, he says it's the emptiness of Zion. It's we don't have ki mit Zion tetze Torah. We don't have. So this is a very strong theological connotation seen by Scholem, for example, here. I don't read it, it's a long poem. I just wanted to I don't know if you can follow me, if it's clear what I'm saying, or just trying to give you some kind of a frame of interpretations, you know, in all kinds. There are many more.
Question, statement and a question. The statement is, you know, about the poor man, the countryman, and the guard and the gate. When we spoke the first time, I mentioned to you George Mantello, a good friend of mine, George Mantello.
Yes.
Okay. And why am I bringing it up? Not because of the Shoah. David Cranston, my friend who researched many of these Jewish rescuers, he wrote a book about Mantello, and he said that Mantello was once on a bus in Romania, and on a small road, and the bull was before the bus, and the bus couldn't move. And he said that Mantello got off the bus, grabbed the bull by the horn, literally, and moved the bull. Now, David is a man of truth, okay? So there's something to be said that sometimes there's an obstacle, you grab the bull by the horn. Now, what I wanted to ask is 2 questions. What do you think that Kafka meant by this story, or it was just a creative exercise?
All of it. I think it's all of it. I'm a literary reading literature, and I think it's like what you call in German Vieldeutigkeit. There are many meanings to this text. That's why it is so complex. I think everything has some kind of basis in it. That's the great thing about, I mean, you can, it's not an exact science, you know, but if a text, it's like the meeting between the hermeneutics of a text, the explanation, they happen, or the understanding of a text happen in each meeting of a reader with a text, if he has some kind of course, if he's he can't be an analphabet if he reads, but or she. But there is, I think, I can understand. I try to. That's what when I taught, if I may say so, I try to. There is no Torah Missinai in literary interpretation.
Sure. No, the question is, no,
it has to be plausible if you take the context of the whole work. That's why I told you it's not so easy to talk about Kafka, because a lot of people, if they read him, it's not, that's, I try to do my best to somehow show how I think, to me, I have no answer. I can follow, and if you read even the article about Kafka in the Wikipedia, you see what a complex and a person he was. And the strange thing is that the happiest story, which also is a horror story he wrote, is last story about, I mentioned it already, about Josephine the singer and the folk of mice, or the people of mice, which is like in a paradise, but it's also, it's like even, you know, and a lot of what you said before about the Shoah also here, there is a picture of all the mice flooding, and mice, a person as a mouse is something, also a small person who nobody sees and nobody really counts. It's like in the Metamorphosis, the Ka, who certainly, not Gregor Samsa, he's called there, he suddenly, one morning, half dreaming, half waking up, feels that he has become a cockroach. And you know, this was in the air to the contempt of people, as it happened in the Shoah, you know, that people were, if you say that a Jew is an insect, then you can kill him, if you give him the connotation. So he felt something. I agree with you that there is a vision of horror in the world also. In World War I, there was a lot of cruelty, and we know that there is a connection between World War I and World War II, and all this is in the air, and a very sensitive and observing person, and very like not having any skin. If you read the diaries of Kafka, you can see him walk in the street, and like everything he takes up, everything on him, he's so sensitive that it's unbearable almost. So you can say it's pathological, but he created a great art about the constitution of man in his time, I think.
Yeah, but where do you see any Jewish signs in, say, in the Metamorphosis in Gregor Samsa? He's just a man.
No, it's the contempt for the Jews. Here I see the feeling that not only the Jews, but also there was a Steinbeck wrote on Men and Mice, and Mickey Mouse of Walt Disney in the this story was written in 24. It was the last story in the year of Kafka's death. In 26 we have, it's like feeling that the little man, the small man, the man from the land, the proletarian, or the what you call petit bourgeois, or someone who is, you know, not a big, there is contempt for people if they don't have power. And this is in the air, you know what I mean? So this is part of the
Jewish aspects in it.
Yes, yes. in this I see it. In this story, I see this, the horror of.
That's what you say. I think one has to, I think that the concepts are not well defined. What meaning is? And certainly the meaning or the subconscious level meaning that Kafka had, and then are the meanings that you have, that Elwood has in mind, in his mind, I have in my mind. That's the imposed meaning that the reader provides. The interesting question is what went on in Kafka's mind? What could he have thought? What did he intend? Because we can interpret it. Once we move to the Mars,
How can I know? Can I tell?
Because you research it, but maybe you can suspect. Look, maybe when we go to the Mars, it's ahead of us. We're going to explore space, so we're going to start living in outer space, in Mars, wherever.
He
and then
dealt with microscopic things, with little. One of his last stories is called the artist of
hunger artist.
Hunger, the Hungerkünstler.
Right,
so
hunger.
He has a lot of sense for the theater, for performance, for gestures of people. Yes. He went to the cinema. There is a book written by a man a German who is himself an actor, a cinema actor, but he wrote the book Kafka Goes to the Cinema. All these elements, very theatrical, very the gestures are very. You have to take this whole. So it's not a landscape. It's not a romantic landscape or a beautiful or a frightening building where the man from the land comes, from the country. But there are gestures. That's why I said it's a caricature of a grotesque. He makes this. This is kind of the weapon of the weak man to caricature, to have a sense of grotesque, absurd sense of humor. It's all in Kafka.
But there's something else in Kafka. Many novels are love stories, or war stories, detective stories.
Love stories?
Not Kafka. Many stories in literature, okay? And things like that, okay? It's also science fiction. So one of the ways that I see Kafka, he comes up with a strange idea, a unique idea which never existed before, maybe very rarely existed, like somebody metamorphosing into a bug. Then he has to work out, once he has that idea, he's stuck with it, he has to work out the details. He has to do something with it. Or the hunger artist. When I heard that the hunger artist, I think I read in Wikipedia that Kafka at the end of his life had difficulty swallowing, right? And then maybe the hunger artist was actually based on reality. But the others are, many of them, especially the short stories, are based on some fantasy, nothing to do with the regular worldly experiences. And then once you have it, then you have to work it out. You're stuck with it, Like you give yourself a job, make up a title, metamorphosis.
But if you put it in the context of his whole work, it has other connotations too. One doesn't exclude the other.
Also, but it could be, that he gave himself a number of titles, metamorphosis.
But
so once you have the title, you have to develop it.
But it wouldn't have such a deepness of meaning for so many researchers and readers, and who are not just reading it for entertainment, but there is some kind of power in this language, in this genus. So,
No, but that means that that the analysis is maybe not necessarily the idea only. First of all, let's say that metamorphosis. Okay, that's a title. He has a job of working that out, turning it into a story. But he's the one who's turning it into a story. Psychology comes into place. His style comes into place, right? His language comes into place. Because if you write in German, it's probably very different than if you write in modern American English.
But also, it's also his home situation that he was living with his family,
Yeah, right.
And
his whole situation also. But he certainly is a great writer. Right, Ehud? What do you think?
What?
Well, I certainly agree. I mean, I find it attractive in a funny way, because you don't enjoy reading the books. You suffer, actually. But you're attracted nonetheless, and it's weird.
Yeah, I agree.
Also because of the creativity that is so unusual, so short also. Yeah. It's not much metunzat, right? There's some power in this.
I want to read you a short story which also exemplifies this notion of not being able to move, you know, and to go somewhere, to go away from the house of the parents, to go away from Prague, to go away, to make your way in the world. It's called the next village. And I'm now translating it directly, simultaneously from the German. My grandfather used to say, life is so amazingly short. Now, in the memory, in remembering it, it becomes so condensed, so even shorter, that, for example, I can hardly understand how a young man can decide to ride into the next village without being afraid that if you even don't take into account all kinds of unlucky accidents, only the time of a very simple, happy life will not be long enough for such a ride. You know, so you see, it's not him. He is citing someone is citing his grandfather. So you see, it's like he's playing all the time with this not moving. Maybe I give you another example from Walter Benjamin in order to make how much thought there is or suggestions are. Walter Benjamin writes to Scholem in the 30s when he was in Paris and Scholem was in Jerusalem, and they were very intensive writing. So he, at some place, he says that Kafka looks to him like the world of a physician, the world view of a physician who stands on a threshold and can't move from there because he knows how much movement is within the wood of this threshold from one room into the other. It's all moving, it's all, he knows, so he can't move. You know, it's like a physician who is obsessed by what he sees when he looks at wood and at all the action or at some other material, you know. That's how, so not being able to move. So there are so many suggestions and they are all convincing in some way, you know.
The stories are very convincing. You know, if you let yourself get immersed into the story, they're very convincing, sure. As unusual as they are. Tell me, do you think that the fact that he lived in Prague had some effect on his writing? Because Prague is a very unusual city. It's very magical in some sense, at least nowadays.
I don't know how magical it was then, you know, because of the golem, you think, but this is not
just
the whole
golem.
story.
You know, they're selling all over these marionettes.
I mean, first of all, this is the connotation of many Jews about the identities, you know, in the Habsburg Empire with all these many ethnic and religious groups. There are like person like in Prague or in Czechoslovakia there are three different identities, you know. And languages, there is the Jews, the Czechs and the Germans, and there are the religions, and it's all, you know, and there are minorities who are somehow lived together and the Jews were mostly connotated with the German language. So this plays a great role because and it's a special German which Kafka writes. It's like this, I know, coming from Switzerland. The German language, I'm not talking about the dialect, even the vocabulary of Swiss German writing or speaking is different from Austria, is different from Germany. In Germany, it's different in the different lands. So only the language, you know, and the Jews most until World War I were connotated with the German culture. And then after the war, the Czechs became, there was a republic. There was, after the breakdown of the empire, there were a lot of Jews who went with the Czechs, who were trying to have a democracy, to have a republic, and all kinds of things like that. So it's even more. I mean, you have it in Germany too, in the places that are at the border of Germany to Poland, for example, Silesia or Pomerania, or what it's, I don't know how you call it. So there is a German culture, a Jewish culture, and a Polish culture. So you have all these places, and Prague is one of these places where, and there were times of, they were either isolated from each other. All knew probably Czech. Kafka probably knew Czech language too, but his main language and his was German, and it fit. And then there were also animosities on this basis. You have the same in Russia. There were all these minority rights that had to be worked out at the end of World War I in all kinds of. So this is, you know, this is part of the tension, part of the reality of life. Not being the only minority.
Right? What did you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am.
You gave a wonderful lecture, a wonderful shiur or discussion. I'm sorry if I talk too much this way. Etc. You know, I have to go short.
It was your suggestion to deal with Kafka, so it's okay.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors. Anyway, thank you very much. Really, thank you very much.
I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask one last question. Do you see any parallel between the writing of Kafka and Borges?
What? I don't know. I don't know Borges.
You don't know Borges.
I don't know Borges. I haven't read Borges. I'm sorry. One too much for me.
I agree.
But there are. I know that there are. There is also a Kafka and Agnon, and you can see parallelities also with Kafka and Agnon. And there are a lot of, if there are Agnon researchers who think that he must have read Kafka and he denied it. And, you know, these things, but about Borges, I know that there is, people see affinities, but I didn't follow up.
I don't know his works that well. I only know his short stories. I think it's what I left the collection. And it was also very imaginative themes. Some are recursive, that somebody goes up a river and then gives, out of himself comes himself, and things repeat. And they're very short stories, very unusual ideas, not from the real world, but an very imaginative story, and they're very short, very powerful. Okay, that's the commonality that I see. Short story.
There's some sort of common mystics.
There's also mystical. And he also has some, he's not Jewish, but he has some Jewish influence. No matter he called, the collection is called Aleph. You know? He wrote about infinity, like an infinite, the Library of Babel, I think it's called, where people spend all their life, and what is there? There are books and books and books. People spend their whole life there. What is it? What are the books? They have all the possible, let's say, 300, 400 page books, and they have all the possible permutation of the letters. So when you walk in there, you see all the truths and all the falsities and the imperfect copies, and then the falsifications of things and the reputations of the falsifications. So it's a very unusual idea, just a bit like Kafka, but with a different atmosphere, you know, in that sense.
Okay, and you know that Kafkaesque has become a term. Kafkaesque means, even for people who haven't read one word of Kafka, they know that Kafkaesque is such a gloomy, where you don't know, you find yourself, you don't know where you are, you don't know where you go, you are frightened, you are, that's Kafkaesque. It's what you call the uncanny situation of man. Yeah.
Peter, can I ask you, you know, because Kafka was born in Prague,
yes,
and because of his Jewish roots, do you think that has a connection that Czechoslovakia, the Czech people, have had a very close connection with the Jewish people and have been very close, basically, with Israel, supporters of Israel?
No, that's because of Stalin.
In Europe,
That's because of Stalin, I think. Because before Stalin turned
So what do
against
you think
Israel,
today?
When do you with Israel, but not, it depends in what time.
in 1948,
You know,
a lot of
even,
weapons came from there.
I know that Václav Havel came to Jerusalem when he was
No,
president. I know.
No, that is not.
even
Let me say something.
There we go.
That is
I
referring
don't
to
know.
1948, when we got a lot of military help from Czechoslovakia. But that's not,
Okay.
you know, the
But
pilots were
then we
trained
also
there.
had we also had good how do you call it in the Bursa menayot. היו לנו מניות טובות גם אצל סטלין.
No, because Stalin was hoping that Israel would
But it
turn
was very
communist.
short time.
Czechoslovakia unless they didn't act on
was-
their own. They were given a command. Czechoslovakia is very developed, much more developed than the Soviet Union industrially, also than Hungary. And Hungary was fairly well developed, by the way. And
we even see like today, Larry, today, Czechoslovakia, you know, the Czech Republic, they stand out in Europe.
Also Hungary stands up.
Not only that.
But Hungary also stands up for Israel, with all the problems that they have with anti-Semitism. I don't think that's because of Kafka. But I can say one thing.
But do you think there could be a connection from Kafka being born in Prague, that the Czech people are more favorable towards the Jews, and
He is good business. You know, there are T-shirts with Kafka. Kafka has become a pop star. You know.
Right. Also the Golem also, by the way.
You have to see this too. You know, I was when I first saw T-shirts with Kafka, I must say I took it I found it horrible, but now I got used to it. That's the new pop culture, so you have to accept it. But it's business, you know.
No, that's not. It's part of their heritage also. You know, also like the Golem. There's a
I don't
statue of the
know.
Golem.
I don't know. The Czech.
The Maharal is part of the culture,
leader,
just like the Vilna Gaon is part of the culture of
Jerusalem, and met with the Rabbonim in Jerusalem in the time, you know, in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always like a bit of a connection, and there's very famous pictures of Rav Sonnenfeld with Czech delegation that came, and which was very unusual because
it might be also legends. You know, I'm very skeptical. I'm a little.
I've seen the pictures. It's actually in the ambassador's. It's in the ambassador's home, in the Czech ambassador in his home.
Okay. So sometimes it's also a question of the person, you know, not of the country.
It's true.
You know, there are. I think people. I have made this experience. People I had experience at the German department in Jerusalem with professors coming from Germany as guest professors. You know, they felt so good. You know, they took up down the ties, and they felt like, you know, and some of them were this, and someone were serious, but there is a feeling like it was, we really, you can feel free, it's not formal, it's all these things. We were really, you know, it has changed, because today people go in all our Ben Gurion, he went with an open collar, but now today everyone is with a tie and with, you know, it depends, you know, but these things are also the atmosphere. I think it was some attraction. I can see it like that too, you know. Besides, I mean, people who come from Germany and who want to have a dialogue on Jewish matters with Jews, this is part of what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I'm now going to say, you know who David Flusser is or was? He was a professor, he was from Prague.
Yeah.
He was professor for early Christianity, but he was lived in Talbia with a kippah. He was politically left, but he was a believing man, and he had a cousin. His name was Willem Flusser, who was during the Shoah. He was in Brazil, and he was a cultural philosopher, and they had contacts. And then after in the 80s, 90s, he came back to Europe, and he also was in Prague, and his things were published. He had published a lot in Portuguese, but a lot of things were published in German. And there is one volume, To Be a Jew, where he writes about all kinds. And there he says, there are Jews for Jews and there are Jews for non-Jews. Sometimes I feel that I'm a kind of Jew for non-Jews, you know, because I grew up among the non-Jews. It doesn't have to do anything with religion. It's really a cultural. So I try to explain, you know, and it's difficult because sometimes I feel they decide what they can catch as Jewish is Jewish, and then sometimes I'm too Jewish, you know. There are also cultural clashes. I just know it from and Flusser has he has a wonderful text called Waiting for Kafka, as in Waiting for Godot. It's a wonderful text. I don't know if it has been translated into English. I have this volume in German, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, like you have to be sympathetic with Kafka. You have to tune yourself into and he writes about the looking at the fleas in the color of the doorkeeper, but with a lot of, and he also says from him I have this notion that most of the characters in Kafka live in a world, in an ancient primal before Welt, yeah, in a world before our world, and they are creatures. They are very, very hard to understand creatures, but it's wonderful and very suggestive the way he writes. So some of my thoughts also come from there too. Marjani Kragiluina, you know, but he was from Prague too, and he was. And he really had a bad luck. He was and he was very much appreciated as a cultural philosopher. He spoke all the languages, and he died in a car accident when he on the border between Czechoslovakia and Austria. He just died, but he was really an amazing person, a very, very suggestive. He had, just to give you one example, he also compares the Greek culture and the Jewish culture. And his idea was, why do the Jews have so many mitzvot? He wasn't a religious Jew. He said it's like a transformation of polytheism, of the many gods. So instead of having gods, the Jews translated into daily deeds. I think it's a wonderful idea.
That's a very interesting concept. Wow.
Isn't this an interesting concept? It's even not apikosi. I mean, it can be accepted. Yeah.
That's novel. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's what. So I really so you see, sometimes there are people who have this, and he is from Prague, of course, and there is a wonderful a correspondence between him and David Flusser. There is also 2 letters, very basic about it. It's a wonderful book. But a lot of things are not translated into, they don't interest, people are not anymore interested. And English, but English is today the language, the lingua grata in the, you know, in the scientific world, because German was once the language of Oriental sciences, of a lot of sciences in the 19th century, and it's not anymore a language of science. Everybody writes English, no? So you have conquered the world, the English.
I just want to mention the picture that I saw. It was of Masaryk and Rabbi.
Masaryk, but Masaryk was a special person. Masaryk was really a very outstanding.
He came to Jerusalem. He came and he met with the rabbis here in Jerusalem, which is.
But I think that's a personal matter. And Havel was also a very special person, I think.
Thank you very much, but I have to leave. So
okay.
Me too.
Glad
Glad that you joined us.
Thank you. Really I enjoyed it very much, and
we enjoyed it also. We really enjoyed it.
Great.
You know so much. It's just. You must have infinite knowledge.
I hope that I came through because I'm jumping. It was I couldn't put together a
No, it came true. I find it very.
did it come through? So I'm glad. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thank you. And
All the best, Ellen.
I'll join once in a while. Maybe I'll be among the audience because I really like. It reminds me of my studies in Jerusalem when all my friends coming from abroad were Anglo-Saxons, either from South Africa or from Canada or from America or from England. So I told my husband that it's like being once like in a group of Bnei Akiva when I was a madricha, and like my student times in Jerusalem when because we were in Sabres, so we had a common, and I learned a lot of English from there also, not only from the studies at the university. So I felt very at home with you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Could we impose on you some other time to give another talk to us or something? Well, that would be a chutzpah.
Yeah, I'll try. Yes.
If it fits.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a chutzpah if we ask you?
No, I'm not, chutzpah is a good thing. Okay. I told you, I would have gone in the...
No, I'm going to correct that. Positive chutzpah is a good thing. Negative chutzpah is not a good thing.
Okay.
Right?
Negative chutzpah is not chutzpah. It's to be mean.
To be mean.
That's
right.
not chutzpah.
No, not to have derech eretz, okay? That's right.
Yeah.
I thank you very much, and I'm sure, not just us, also on the Zoom.
Larry, could you give the vote of thanks to Ite as you? I think it would be very appropriate if you could give the vote. Could you give the vote of thanks to Ite? I think it would be very appropriate.
No, you give it. You are much more eloquent than I. I'm very direct.
No, Larry, you have the personal connection, and it was your idea.
No, you also have a personal connection.
Yeah, I must tell you, because this was really, I said, this is like something happening to you, which you have to take up, because I got he told me, how did you find me? He was looking for, and I was in the trial of, I was involved in this trial in Israel about the Kafka legacy,
The manuscripts.
The manuscripts, yeah. And there was an American journalist of Forward who wrote, "Who is Ita Shedletsky, Kafka specialist?"
Wow.
And he had looked up and he has written, and I called him, I said, it's really funny. It was really, and that was Larry got from a friend in South Africa, because he has asked the whole world, how do you have someone who can talk about Kafka? So I said, this one I have to go for it by hook and by crook, because it's such a coincidence, I mean, you can say it's bashered, but it doesn't matter. But it's something that you take up. Yeah, okay.
It's meant to be bashered, right? It's a good thing that it was bashered. I think it's a good thing. So
I enjoyed it very much.
Why don't you close, because you're much more eloquent than I.
No, Larry.
Oh, you're very eloquent in a different way. There are all kinds of eloquence.
That's true. I am very eloquent in my inelegance. That's also something. Now I'm going to say something, and maybe Les and also Laura would like to say something in closing, because we really had an extremely pleasurable and informative shiur with you. It's a shiur.
Yeah, that's what I wanted it to be. I told you, it's like learning,
It's opening up the world. The story was about, let me connect it to the story. I have a very good friend in New York. I knew him from Budapest, from Cheder. And he escaped from Budapest in 1956. And then we met again in the yeshiva, Torah Vodaas in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And he was my closest friend. His name is Gabor Katzgabi. Okay. And he was one of my doormen. You know what a doorman is in America, in a luxury building? Somebody who opens the door for you. You have a uniform, you open the door.
Like in big hotels, they also have doormen like this.
And they have to have a uniform and a hat, and everything else. Well, I think people are very lucky if they have doormen who open up doors for them. And I think that you opened up a door for, at least for me and for all of us, and also for the people who watch the YouTube, a door into another way of looking at Kafka, which is outside of the world of politics, the Schriftut, and the virus. There are other things in the world besides that, right? There are beautiful things and deeper things. And I think it's an opportunity that you gave us to disengage from all that mess and to connect to something that's memorable and valuable.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And I'd like to say one more thing that, you know, before we married, I gave my wife two of Kafka's books because it was so meaningful to me, The Trial and the collection Metamorphosis. And once we were in Prague and we went to the Maharaj's grave and we went to Kafka's grave, very meaningful to us. And you let me also connect to a figure who means something to me, who is creative. Nothing is wrong being creative, besides all the meanings. Just something creative, out of the ordinary. You know, the world is more than the ordinary. You know, there's things which are shiny and special. And thank you for letting us connect to that.
Thank you. I'm getting. You said something which I couldn't hear before.
Oh, that you let us connect to the things which are special.
No, I'm talking to Les Glassman.
To Les. Okay.
Okay, so Ita, thank you so much, Larry. No one could have said it better than you, and you did open the door, and to a whole new world. But you not only gave a share, you gave an interactive share where everybody could interact, and everybody could feel part of it, which is so special. It wasn't just a share where you spoke. It became real, and you have a gift, because we really feel that you're in the room with us. We really feel connected, and you made us so connected to Kafka. He became very real tonight, and he'll become very real to those who watch.
That's the best thing. I enjoyed. I told Larry. Now I have to tell you, when I was in Zurich, I have to tell you, I'm third generation Mizrahi. My grandfather came from Warsaw to Switzerland in I don't know the exact year, but in 1902, as you know, Mizrahi was founded by Rabbi Reines.
Yeah.
And in 03, there already was a branch of Mizrahi in Lucerne. And in Zurich, my grandfather was in Lucerne at the time, and he was a delegate to the Congress in Basel in 1903.
Wow.
As a delegate from Poland. He was still, I found it in Die Welt, in the newspaper Die Welt. When I went through all these newspapers for my doctorate, I found suddenly that there are protocols of and I found Gutglück was my name, and it said a little town in Poland. I think that's how they wanted more delegates, so they gave delegates from a small town, and he was already in Lucerne. It was very funny. That's one thing. Then my father was in Brita Noah Hadati, it was called then what was Bnei Akiva afterwards. And over the age of 18, it was called Bachad, Brit Chalutzim Datim. And I have pictures of my father as a madrich, and he looked like a scout, with a beret and with a shirt like a scout and with a tie. It's really like scout with an Israel flag. And then me and my brother, we were also, and my mother was in St. Gallen in Blau-Weiß, which was not religious, but it was Zionistic. So it's a Zionistic family. And me and and then I came into Bnei. My brother is 4 years older. And he then went to Lucerne to the yeshiva. Then he was in Kfar Haroeh with 5 other Swiss boys in 55. And then he came, my father said, you have to come back and finish high school, do what you call a Bagrut. And then you can go back. Then he was in Kerem Beyavne. And then when I came to Jerusalem, he was at Merkaz Rav Kook. And he is still, I'm a bit far away from all that, but we are in good connections. So that's and I myself, when I was 13 years, now we were in my grandfather was one of the founders of the Eastern European community in Zurich, called Agudas Achim. Today it's really, it's very, very, very black. If I may say, use the word as a collective. But then it was a diverse community, as I said, in this house. Then they built a synagogue. And in my Bnei Akiva group, I didn't know, I realized it only a few years ago. Why did I want to have a group, to be madricha of a new group? And all the children were from my community, from the Ostjüdische Gemeinde, you know. And I called up, I was 13 years old, and I called up all kinds of parents whom I knew that they had children at the age of 6, 7, 8, something like that. And I said, we can meet in the area where we live, and then go the whole way. The community center was in another quarter of Zurich. It was quarter of an hour to go. And I said, I take the children, I bring them back after the Sikha, and then I go back to the SNE for the Onek Shabbat, you know? So that's how I built a group. So if you're talking about, you know, being a busybody with people and giving Sichot and talking about Parashat HaShavua and telling about Hasidism according to the problematic stories of Buber, which we had at home, but still you can make out of it something, you know, and that's okay. So that's my story. So I was, so you have an explanation that it was like, it's some in the, as I told Larry, it's in the genes somewhere. So, you know,
It's I agree with Larry. It would be wonderful if you could give another talk. It would be such a big honor for us, really, if you could, because wow, your experiences and what you've gone through, and
I'll be glad. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
You know, Rabbi Reuben Klein, who was at the shiur about psychology, he said that he'd very much like to hear about Gershom Scholem and also Buber and the other person that you mentioned. I'd like to ask you one last question. It's always a problem with me, and I always have a question. I'm a shy person, you know.
As long as you get an answer, it's okay.
What is it?
As long as you get an answer, it's okay.
No, I learned that you don't always get an answer in life. You know, it doesn't work out. I read one of my another author I like very much called Stanislav Lem. Did you ever hear about him?
No.
He was Jewish. He was lived in Krakow. And he died recently, maybe 10 years ago. And he wrote science fiction, real science fiction. His collection, I don't like his books that much.
I have no, science fiction is not my favorite.
Not your cup of tea, right?
No, not my,
there's a reason why I brought
not my cup of tea, yeah.
No, there's a reason why I brought this up. So his books I don't like that much, but he has a collection of short stories called Siberia. It's almost like children's stories, you know? I'm not going to go into that. But he wrote a book which is introspective about an essay about how does he write a story? What is the process? You know, that he has an idea. How does he develop it? He said he built a scaffold, like, you know, the building, as far as I remember. At the end, he removes the scaffold. I don't remember all the details. Do you think that Kafka wrote anything about his modus operandi as a writer? How does he write? The whole cycle, where the ideas come from. What is the technique? Did Kafka write from beginning to the end? Or there were a lot of corrections, for example, the rewrites? What do you think?
I don't know.
You looked at the manuscripts. Are they clean? They're typed or they handwritten?
Oh, I looked at the manuscripts only very quickly because that's another story. I mean, this trial was a lot of injustice done to the people. I didn't like the law. I learned a lot about the world of the law, you know, and of courts and of advocates. That's a story. I didn't look at
you didn't look at the manuscripts? I thought you went to Switzerland.
I did, but I didn't. I looked at manuscripts, handwritings of letters of Gershom Scholem. That I did, but not Kafka's.
Oh, so what did you do?
Kafka's I just saw. What?
I thought that the National Library or the Supreme Court asked you to go to Switzerland.
Yes, but I had time. I had to run through. I had to look at the top and look at it. They didn't want me to look too much at what was there. and they didn't want me to.
But did you have an impression
leave
if
that.
these were clean copies that Kafka wrote? I was with my wife and one of my daughters at the
Yeah,
British.
but I didn't do research on Kafka on that. I told you I came to this matter by chance. That they found me because I was connected with Leo Beck Institute, and people knew that I can read handwritings, and I mean, I'm not a Kafka expert in this, in context with German Jewish literature, as I said, but I'm not. I didn't study his handwriting. I didn't.
No, they're just interesting to know.
I never study handwriting. Yeah. So.
No, the issue is not the handwriting study, but for example, we went to the British Museum in London, and one of the chambers is about manuscripts. So the manuscript by Dickens, and there was a manuscript by Mozart, a composition. And Mozart said he writes without any tickling. He just writes, it comes out.
That's what my husband, who is a musicologist, says, that Mozart, in contrast to Beethoven, he had it all in his head.
It just came out.
And he wrote it down without, but that's why he lived only 30 some years, you know? All his energies.
And Dickens,
he was a genius, I mean.
Dickens, it was all crossed out and tickled in and etc. So it's interesting to know that aspect of Kafka. And if you ever read, I don't know how many writers actually think about how they write.
Oh, he did. Also, there are corrections in Kafka. He wasn't, and he was a very hesitating writer. He didn't want to publish his things. I mean, why did he want abroad to throw them? And you can see if you read his diaries, it was like life-saving, the writing for him. He gives pictures that with one hand he writes, and with the other hand he holds the wall that it shouldn't fall down on him. That was Kafka.
Really?
It's like, yes.
He was really holding the wall?
You should read his diaries.
I'm going to try to read his diaries.
You should read his diaries. It's wonderful. There is also a lot of sense of, there you can see sense of humor also. And it's, I mean. Yeah.
Interesting person. And I thank you very much.
But very, very, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's how do you say it? Zehadati.
It's mutual.
I must tell you, I had anxiety of coming in touch with you because I heard of all kinds of ideas you had, which I don't believe in. But then I said, but these people, about the Third Temple and about Malchut David, but in life, as in literature, everybody, as soon as people are open and in a very kind, in a way, universal, I can deal with everything.
No,
I really wanted to say that.
But you misunderstood this.
Are you?
Yes? You misunderstood the whole thing. It's not we who created.
I did misunderstand. That's what I'm trying to say. I didn't.
No, what you said is a misunderstanding. Because you are the one who created an atmosphere. You created that, okay? Okay. A presenter can create.
No, I think beforehand when I had to decide if I want to give, I told you that too.
But the atmosphere.
So I wanted to be, yes.
We didn't create the atmosphere. You created it. Somebody else could create another atmosphere. It's also a creative endeavor to create an atmosphere. You create one that's open, dialogue. That's all. I'm not guilty about it. It's your fault. You created that. Okay. That's why it turned out so nicely. Okay. So different.
Okay.
And להתראות, בהקדם.
להתראות.
We'll see before you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova and a good year. And
לאלתר לחיים, ככה אמרו אצלנו, לשנה טובה תיכתבו ותיכתמו לאלתר לחיים טובים ולשלום.
Budapest said, לשונו טייבו תיכוסרו. No? You said לשנה טובה או לשונו טייבו?
The whole speech.
All right. All the best.
It depends. Leshune toive tikosaive v'tikosaive. I'm speaking Hebrew. When I was in Talmud Torah and Mayeka, I one day said we want to read. I was the one who said I want to read in Havara Sfaradit. I don't want to read in Havara Ashkenazit.
When you went to synagogue, what was the synagogue like? In the synagogue, you said Amen or Amen?
Was Buri Chatu. בוריחתו.
בורחתו, בורחתו, בוודאי.
אדוי שם אלוקייני מלך אוילום.
אלוקיינו,
אוירה
נכון.
פי הגופן.
אומן, אומן,
אלוקייני.
אומן.
Not אלוקיינו, אלוקייני. You know?
אלוקייני, נכון. כאילו חסידים, maybe, no? חסידים.
Yes, I told you. At least I didn't, the last secret I tell you, my father's family, my father, from his father, they are descendants of not no other than the Yehudi Kadosh Mipshische.
Oh, I think you told me. Right.
Oh,
That's
really?
my Yisrael.
Wow.
Yes. When I heard the lecture of Rabbi Breitowitz, I almost fainted because I said,
You're a descendant. Wow. Of, that's
my grandfather was an Alexander Huset, and he went 2 years to Brisk, and he stopped for a certain time going with the Gartel because he had been in Brisk, so he had all the worlds, you know, in his. Yeah.
sure, it's a
and from my grandmother's side, who I'm named after her, Ita, the wife of this Yitzchak Gutglück. She was a descendant of the Bach, of the Beit Chadash.
Of the Bach.
Yes, of the Beit Chadash. I always mix it up with Yoel Sirkis was his name.
Is Yoel Circus.
Yoel Sirkis.
So the Bach is Yoel Circus. That is the Bach.
Yes.
That is the Bach, yeah.
Yeah, I know. My brother once made a Shushelet Yuchasin in his small handwriting. I made a scan of it. It's not done. So I have all the, yes. That's my...
a good friend of mine's wife, Narit Bank, and her mother is Circus. She's a very famous Israeli cookery expert.
Ruth Sirkis. Ruth Sirkis, I know.
And she's from the Bach. They're descendants of the Bach.
I never thought of it.
And that is, I've known that for many years. I'm very close with Murray and Nurit. And she's a direct descendant of the Bach.
So me too.
Oh, so it's amazing. Wow.
You see, all this, I have a friend who thinks that all the Jews are somehow. She tries to find in what is it called, Jenny? All these organizations. Yes, she has this crazy idea to find out that all the people are connected with each other, probably somehow. But I think there are more interesting things to do. You can know this and take it, you know. But, okay.
All right. All the best, and soon good Shabbos also. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good Yantav. All right.
And you know, if you're going to say lehitraot to our next.
Litraot, no, not at all. Litraot behekdem soon.
Okay. Bye.
It's been a great honor and a privilege.
Me too. Really. Thank you very much for hosting me. Thank you.
Sure. We thank you.